Do you often find yourself struggling with procrastination? Like you're really motivated, you do want to start, but you can never seem to get things going? Well, if so, then this video is for you because I'll be talking about the specific evidence-based therapy strategies that I use with my patients when their goal is to reduce procrastination and how you can use it to feel unstuck from your life and start moving towards your goals. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Parky. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in clinical psychology at Stanford University. I love talking about mental health and especially the tools and techniques we can use from therapy to support our overall mental well-being, and I love to share some of that information with you. So oftentimes people think about procrastination as this very vague and nebulous thing. Like they don't really understand why they're procrastinating. They don't understand why they can't get unstuck from the couch, even though they're super motivated. They want to do it. They want to reach their goals. And as a result, they're often thinking, why am I like this? I'm horrible. Like, why can't I just get things done? And they feel this sort of shame and guilt associated with the procrastination, which makes them want to withdraw even more. For me, when I think about more vague and complex ideas, I really try to distill it down into something very clear. And I think fundamentally, procrastination is an issue with emotion regulation. So what I think happens is that when we procrastinate, we think about something what we need to do or we should do or something that we feel like we ought to do. And then in that moment, we get this sort of strong aversive negative emotion like guilt or shame or anxiety or panic or a sense of overwhelmness. And as a result, to get away from that sort of very strong negative aversive emotion, we decide to do something to distract ourselves. So this might be scrolling on our social media account. It might be lying back on the couch and watching TV. It might be binge eating. It might be doing anything that allows us to get away from that very strong negative emotion in the first place. And then the question becomes why? Why do we feel such a strong aversive negative reaction to something as potentially simple as opening up our laptop or reading a Word document or starting a new project? What is it about that situation that creates such an aversive response? I'll tell you a story about a patient that I recently saw who was struggling with procrastination. She was studying for a course and she had a really hard time even opening her laptop to be able to start studying. And it wasn't the studying itself that was particularly nerve-wracking. Like she wasn't super worried about the idea of studying itself. In fact, she kind of found studying itself to be quite enjoyable. But the thing for her was that she attached this act of opening up her laptop and reading this document with the rest of her life. She thought about the fact that she needed to find a job and that she was having a baby soon and how she was going to manage having a job and the baby and the changes in the relationship and her family dynamics and all that jazz. So everything about her future, all that nebulous, scary stuff was associated with the one act of opening up her laptop. So it became very obvious why it was hard for her to get started in the first place. And I suspect that happens for many of us. When we think about like starting a new project or starting a YouTube channel, for example, we're not just thinking about making that one video, we're thinking about the hundreds of videos that we're gonna have to make at some point. Or, for example, when I was working on my dissertation, when I opened the document, it froze me in place because I wasn't thinking about writing that specific section. I was thinking about the 200-page document that I had to do. And as a result, because I took all of this stuff in the future and made it into that one very moment, I was sort of wrought with panic and anxiety. And as a result, it made it very hard for me to even get a word down, let alone 200 pages worth of words. So now let's talk about some evidence-based strategies that you can use to start tackling your procrastination. And I think the first thing that can be super helpful is to just bring awareness to the current situation, to kind of say, oh, like I am creating this sort of very scary story right now and attaching a lot of significance to this one act of starting. Like for example, with my patient, she realized she was creating this entire narrative about the next year, the next 5 years about her life with the one act of simply opening up her laptop to start studying. And by just that recognition, she was able to bring awareness and then stop herself from thinking about all those different things and just focus on the one thing that she was doing right now, which was she was studying. So once you've kind of brought awareness to the situation, the next thing that can be helpful to do is to start managing some of the shame or guilt or anxiety or panic that's kind of brought up, and then use ways to kind of re-regulate your emotions. So this can be through deep breathing, it can be through a little meditation, it can be through splashing your face with cold water, whatever works for you to bring the emotions down so that you don't have to follow their action urge, because emotions like shame is going to tell you to withdraw, anxiety is going to tell you to run away. So we need to manage these emotions to be able to approach our goals and values. So with another one of my patients, she had a lot of difficulty starting her work because she had struggles with the feeling of not knowing. So whenever she read a passage on her textbook, for example, where she didn't understand the concepts immediately, she would be fraught with this sort of feeling of not knowing, and then thoughts like I'm stupid or I'm worthless would pop up, and as a result, she would stop working on the work. So one thing that we did together was actually do a little bit of an exposure practice together in the session. And what I did was I used ChatGPT to actually create some legal jargon that we couldn't really understand very well, and we would sit there together and just look at it and be like, oh, like we both have this sort of sense of like feeling stupid and feeling like we don't know anything. And as a result, we were able to really sit with it, tolerate the distress, and over time, her anxiety surrounding not knowing started to reduce. And then she was able to with a better clarity of mind, understand the material much more because she was willing to sit through the anxiety of not knowing. And another strategy that I found very helpful is to break it down into more manageable bite-sized chunks. Like for example, when I thought about my dissertation and I had the whole 200-word page document in front of me, I felt kind of paralyzed in that moment because I had so much to do. So what I did was I actually broke it down into 5 different chapters with 5 different Word documents. So I was never working on the dissertation. I was just working on this specific chapter or this specific section. And that made me feel psychologically a lot more relaxed to be able to do the work rather than feeling like there's a huge mountain of work and feeling completely paralyzed from it. And in some ways, when I think about procrastination, the hardest part is getting started, to break through that initial inertia, to obtain the momentum then needed to be able to continue on with your work. So we need to make that first step as small as possible and as easy as possible to break through the friction to allow for the momentum and the flow state to begin. So one thing that you can even say to yourself is, actually, if I were to just read for 1 minute or do my work for 30 seconds, then I've succeeded. If I can just open my laptop and get to the page I need to be at, then I've succeeded. So by making that first step easy, that makes it easier for us to be able to then take that with us and run with it and get into our momentum and flow state. And you can even use a strategy, what we call token economy in psychology, which is basically rewarding yourself for doing the things that are hard for you. So for example, every sentence you can reward yourself with a Skittle, or every time you do something and finish up a project, you can kind of like dash it out and treat yourself to a nice little Starbucks drink. Whatever for you works for you when it comes to rewarding yourself for the hard work that you've done, that can be a great way to stay motivated and consistent with your work. And one thing I encourage you not to do, or try your best not to do, is to take too much of a self-critical lens. Like sometimes people will say to themselves, you're such a loser, just get started, like why can't you do it? And for some it might be motivational and might be helpful to get started, but I find that for the vast majority of people, those types of self-critical thoughts tend to just elicit the emotion of shame. And shame, when I think about as an emotion, is not an emotion that gets you to approach and do things and move towards your goals. It's actually one that makes you withdraw and feel worse about yourself. So I encourage yourself to do your best to give yourself some self-compassion, which doesn't mean that you're just avoiding and doing nothing. It means that you're giving yourself and honoring some of the pains that come with change, but moving towards your goals anyway. So I do want this video to be useful for you. So if you have been using this video to potentially procrastinate on some of the things that you need to be doing, I encourage you to, after this video, to take 30 seconds or 1 minute after this video to do some of the work that you need to be doing. And after that, you can decide to stop. You can watch another video, you can do something else, but I want yourself to give yourself the chance and the choice to be able to decide whether you want to keep working or if you want to stop, because that opportunity will give you the freedom to choose. Okay, thanks for watching as always. I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, I encourage you to subscribe because I'll be continuing to make more videos just like this in the future. Bye bye.